Hello traders, and welcome back to another YouTube video. On my previous, or at least one of my previous videos, we talked all about the euro and I gave you guys my opinion. Now, my opinion on the euro is not necessarily just a short-term outlook. I actually had that bearish kind of viewpoint. If you have not already seen that video, take some time really quick to go click on the video that's popping up here on the screen. Go watch my initial idea or my initial prediction. My idea was basically right around the 1.14 to 1.145 area that we would get some sort of rejection. Now, this video is going to be a little bit of an update on that topic, as well as what I'm doing across the board in terms of right now with all of the volatility in markets. We saw oil crash like crazy. The S&P 500 stock market is down quite a bit. We see the euro was rising significantly. We have some CAD pairs moving. So I'm going to basically just be talking a little bit about my own opinion today as a little update to my previous video, as well as kind of how I'm treating things right now. So the euro is selling off very nicely today, which is nice. It goes right along with my kind of prediction in the last video. We came just up to that level where we basically saw some rejection and price started to sell off. So if you guys did not see that video, essentially one of the things that I was talking about was this long-term level of resistance was getting retested by the euro USD. Now the long-term trend here was very, very bearish. And so when price started to rally like this significantly, my idea was that, okay, I'm still fundamentally bearish on the euro, looking for downside action more so than upside. Now, it doesn't mean that the euro can't continue to rally and to potentially break through these levels. That would probably be possible if we see some more volatility and we see some big news hit the headlines that causes people to panic and sell the US dollar, right? That is definitely possible, but my bias here is that price is a bit stretched to the upside, as we talked about in that recent video, and I think that this long-term level will likely want to hold, okay? So if price can rally to the downside, we also talked about previously where price could be headed. So that's kind of what I want to also talk about in this update video. I think it's possible that, as we mentioned, this previous level of resistance could actually be something that we see retested relatively soon on euro USD. Now, the other euro pairs are also falling today as well. We're seeing some pullback on euro USD. This candle right here, though, is interesting because although it's not a guarantee, this candlestick pattern is looking like a bearish engulfing, and it's not a guarantee, but it's a possibility that this could lead to sellers stepping in and buyers kind of taking their foot off the gas pedal, if you will, and we could see a further drop. Now, the big thing here is that if we get a drop down to this level, are we going to hold that and start to break back up and see the continuation of this uptrend? Well, it's definitely possible, but what that would actually have to have, at least in my opinion, would be more catalyst in terms of the fundamentals, in terms of the global market, right? We'd have to see, something bad hit the floor, most likely, as that is primarily what's caused such a sharp rise in the euro, right? A lot of people who are going from those risk-on plays, right, as we talked about on the previous video, those people who were going from the risk on are switching to risk off, which is causing people to buy the euro significantly because the US dollar, right, they're selling the US dollars to basically get back where they borrowed the money from, which is euros. If you didn't understand that, again, watch the previous video. I talked a little bit more about that in that video. So again, that switch is what would cause, the euro to continue, most likely, at least in my opinion. But as we start to see some positivity hit the headlines, I think it's possible, right, that a lot of times these short bursts often end with kind of a sharp pullback when things kind of come around or they round out, right? And so that's what we're looking at right now with euro USD. We are seeing price kind of move to the downside. I think the first stop here would be looking here to see if we can get a nice little drop to that point. In that case, I would consider this a nice little call out. If we can get to that point, that would be where the first targets there are. And then, of course, we also have some other levels that we can talk about. We've got this level here, right, which was a previous level of support. It got broken through recently. Price broke right back through it. And then, of course, we have the long-term low. Okay, so these are some levels where I think euro USD could get to. I think that this one is probably the most likely. This first level is going to be the first one where I think price could head. And then if we do get that significant drop, if we break through that level, which I think is possible, the big thing would be a move down to level 2, which is that long-term previous level of support, which got broken through. And then of course, if we really get bearish on the euro, a move back to 3. Now this is not a one, again, people commented on my video. It was funny because people commented on the video right up in here as price was coming into the level that we talked about. And the second it went over that level, people said basically, oh, you were wrong. And it was funny because, again, my prediction with the euro, this is not a short term. Most of it is a lot of fundamentally based, combining that with the technicals, right? So when we combine those, a lot of times those predictions are not necessarily 1 hour or 4 hour predictions. They are usually daily or weekly predictions. And so right now I have some euro shorts that I am working with that I'm, looking to see if I can get a profit on to see if the price wants to roll over. Now, if it doesn't, then no big deal. We move on to something else. But my bias here is still short, looking to see if we can get a move down to these levels like we are pointing out, right? The 1, 2, and 3 levels are things that I am watching to see if euro pairs can make a move to. While we're at it, let's take a look at some other pairs. Actually, right before I go, I do also want to point, you can see our RSI overextended kind of reading that we got did in fact close back underneath the 70 level, which is, showing that we are starting to see some rounding off and that we might see some continued push back down, maybe even a move back down to where we could get oversold at a certain point. One thing also to notice that I think is really interesting is the RSI here on Euro USD is actually a really good indicator, at least in my opinion, just as a basic overextended level. Take a look here. Price got overextended, price got overextended. What do we see? We saw a nice little reversal. Price got overextended to the upside, extended, potentially bearish, right? So just something to think about there. So Euro GBP is going to be our next one here. I'm going to take a quick look at this pair. You can see that it did get also overextended. Speaking of our RSI right here, right? We did get overextended there. And overall, we do have this downtrend on Euro GBP, right? So the idea here is that the euro is strengthening against the pound in the mix of everything that is going on, right? So with that said, we can actually draw some fib levels. I just want to talk briefly about this fib level here. The 50% looks really interesting to me. You can see a previous level of support there where we did find some strength before price broke down and continued lower, right? So as price starts to retrace up to that point, if we get up to that point, I think that there's a pretty good chance we see some sort of round off and that we see price start to fall there. So it's just something to consider there. I am still bearish again on the euro, and so that's kind of just another pair that I wanted to point out. That would also get us back, if we do see a price movement up to that point, would get us back to overbought status, most likely here on the RSI. So next, let's take a quick look. I'd like to also take a look at Euro Yen, see if we have anything to talk about here. This pair is going to be looking a little bit different. You can notice it looks pretty different than the other euro pairs. In fact, today we're moving up. Why is this pair moving down so much? Well, remember we talked about the yen and how it is a safe haven currency, at least historically, right? Where people or investors move their money into the yen during times of panic, right? So we actually haven't seen so much overbought status here on the euro yen. That is something I wanted to point out. As you can see, again, this pair mostly sold off, actually. So we actually saw kind of the opposite effect here on euro yen. So it's just something to think about there, is the fact that, okay, well, this pair isn't quite the same because we have the yen in that combination. Next, we can talk a little bit about EURAUD. We can talk about Euro Aussie. You can see, I'll clear the chart a little bit and we'll talk a little bit about what's going on with this pair, because you can see this one is unique. And in fact, we might even actually take a look at AUD pairs, or at least AUD USD. You can see this one's severely in the overbought range. And historically, that's been a pretty good indicator that price is stretched. Okay, and so I think that Euro Aussie is also stretched. You can see price actually had that false move to the upside, that kind of fake breakout that we did see. Very, very sharp movement upwards. And that was actually kind of a flash crash when oil had its release. We saw a price spike like that to the upside. So now we're kind of just hesitating around the top here, and I think that it's possible that we head back. One area that, at least I'm keeping my eye on is if we go to the 1 hour chart, looking to see if we can go back and fill this gap that we actually left open from the previous open on the week, right? So we opened, we gapped up, or we made a move to the upside, we spiked up, and now we faded it. So we'll see what we can get there on Euro Aussie. Let's actually take a look now also at AUD USD while we're on the topic of Aussie pairs, which you can see We'll go take a look at the 4-hour chart. We are actually at a really significant level. So we can see that previously this level is held once. We spiked in this area. This was kind of the flash crash. We held that area, and now we are retesting that area to see if we can go bullish, right? We're seeing a little bit of a bounce, so it should be interesting to see if AUD USD can catch a bounce finally. This pair has been severely sold off in the mix of everything that's going on, right? And it has a fundamental reason to do so. You know, the trade wars, as well as the situation in the news, right? A lot of different things causing this pair to really, really severely sell off. And so I think it's possible, though, if we did in fact find a bottom, then this level will probably hold pretty well, I would imagine. That's just at least my personal opinion. One level to look at here on AUD USD that I'll share is this idea here of this downward trend line. If price decides to break through this level, there might be a trend continuation, and there might actually be a bigger reversal in play, just depending on what we see happen with AUD USD. Okay, so let's take a look now. Before we go too far, I do want to just briefly pick up a chart of the S&P, which did catch a bounce today. You might ask, well, why is this significant? This will impact the currency market by a long shot, because how investors are feeling are pretty well shown in the S&P 500. So when it sells off significantly like this, it does in fact cause the currency market to get wild too, right? People get scared, people move their money around in the currency market as well as the stock market. We are catching a bounce today. It looks like we're seeing some buyers step in, which is definitely a good sign for stock investors and for people who are, you know, in my case, looking to short the euro. There is some correlation to this pair right now. I've noticed, you can see this pair is right now quite down, and the euro pairs are quite up, and that is again kind of opposite of each other right now. Okay, so one thing we'll also take a look at before we go is WTI, USD. Take a look at oil. You can see it's also catching a really nice bounce here. We had that 40% drop, or that 30% drop, sorry, yesterday, which was absolutely chaotic, and we are seeing a nice bounce there. A little bit of a 15% bounce. That's not bad at all. We kind of erased some of those losses, and so we'll see if we can get some further bounce back there on oil going forward. Guys, thank you very much for watching this video. If you did enjoy, you guys know what to do. Please like the video down below, subscribe to the channel, and come back and see us again in the future. Thank you very much. We'll see you back next time.